So we'll go ahead and get this meeting going. Leslie, well, there's only 5 of us here. All 5 of us are here in attendance, so that takes care of that. Everyone have a chance to go over the minutes Leslie sent out
Yeah.
from the last month's meeting? Minutes from last month's.
Motion to approve.
Have a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. All right, moving on. We'll go to our discussion points. Before we get on to the new business, I wanted to follow up and kind of let y'all know, as far as old business, the campground amendment that we talked about. I've gotten that approved by the county attorney, and so that's going to be going before the commission. I guess that'll come before planning first before it goes before the commission. There was discussion, we don't have it here, but it's just removing exclusively out of the campground section where it talks about the commercial businesses, where it's going to be exclusively just for people in the campground.
Like removing like
Just that
say a
part.
restaurant per se or
Exactly.
something like that.
So it just takes exclusively out of that, both in the city and the Hartsville, and that's all it changes. So that way, they can then serve outside, just like anything in Gallatin, the ranges and campgrounds that they have.
And that'll be on this month.
That should be, yes. That'll go before planning, on this one, I'll get you a copy of that. Drop the our agenda there.
We're gonna try to do that Monday.
Yeah, I'll get you that, tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Yeah,
So is that gonna be in form of an ordinance?
it'll have to be, yeah.
So is JRC gonna put that together for us?
No, actually, Amy already has something that's been approved by Brandon, so I'm just gonna pass it on to planning and let planning do what y'all see fit with it, and we'll go from there.
Would you like me to just do that in the,
I'll get it to you tomorrow. I don't have a copy of it with me right now.
It'd be good to let GMRC just look at
It will.
this and just make sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's good, but
Yeah,
the
like I
more
said,
eyes that look at it, the less mistakes we might have.
and I couldn't find anything talking about campgrounds. Sam, you might be able to add a little more, but there's just the 2 sections on campground regulations. One for Hartsville, one for Trousdale.
Mhm.
I couldn't find anything else pertaining to campgrounds.
No, it's a standalone section for itself.
So it's just, the ordinance just has that paragraph on each one with exclusively marked out, and try to keep it very simple. Brandon thought that was the easiest way to handle that situation. So that's the update on that. So we have before us now, proposal for Rick Gregory Consulting to help us with the unification of our ordinances. Talking with Rick and the mayor, we talked to him as far as the extent he already has, for when he was our consultant through GNRC. He already has his folder still with all his notes and everything that he ran into with all our ordinances. And so it was really nice that he brought that in. He's like, yep, I'm already familiar. We got everything here. Here's what I charged both Marshall County and Ashland City, $75 an hour. He said it shouldn't take any more than about 11,000, depending on if we decided to change the scope of what he was doing. Most of what he's going to be doing is, most of the language is already same. He even knows the individual who wrote the originals. And said, yeah, he said, going through them, there's gonna be a couple of places he's gonna come in, he'll talk with us, talk with planning. Anything we do here will get passed on to planning. And so I'm really excited. I think it's the only way we're gonna be able to get this accomplished, because the 5 of us don't have the time to sit and rewrite everything. But he is wanting to get our input as county, from planning commission and from zoning, on how we want to resolve some of the differences between them.
So he'll be coming to these meetings.
He'll be coming to hopefully our next meeting. Like I said, I'll schedule that around his schedule so he can be here and kind of talk to us, answer any questions on, kind of get an idea of kind of where we're wanting to go with it. And then after that, as he gets a section completed, he'll email it to us. I'll schedule a meeting so that he can come in, kind of talk us through, if there's any changes that we see that we'd like made, you know, and then he can go on to the next. And just kind of take step by step like we were gonna do anyway. From my original plan, I think now we actually can get this done within 2 years. I think that's gonna be beneficial to everyone. And to have a single person working on it, it makes it easy to get those notes in, those suggestions, those comments, and get it done. So
If
this
I may
is,
say something, Mr. Chairman, especially with Rick. Rick was our advisor for several years, so he kind of knows what we've got going on anyway. And so he's really the perfect person. We're not gonna find anyone probably anywhere else that actually has worked with these codes and regulations for several years and has put things together.
that's what,
We're really lucky.
when we were discussing the scope of the project, he was the first one that I thought of to try to reach out to, and I think we're very fortunate that he's still doing it, and was excited to do it. Come to find out, his parents still live up here.
Yeah, he's a Hartsville guy.
Yeah,
He
so,
he raised just a few houses down from me.
Where is the money coming from?
so, right now, we have, Amy told me it's about $22,000 sitting line item for, GNRC to do the grand master plan that Stephen had. All of us, you know, as a commission and planning, okay, and start. GNRC spent $3,000 of their/our money, because they put 15,000 with that, and then stopped. COVID hit, nothing's been done with that for 2
This
years.
is the 20-year plan?
Yeah.
That,
The big plan that, you know, I kept being told, no, we can't have a plan any other way until we have this big plan. Well, the big plan never happened. 2 years later, we still don't have a plan. So, talking with her and the mayor, we're gonna look at making sure after 2 years, kind of in breach of contract at this point, because we've had no results, no nothing, since then. And just taking the 11,000 from that, moving it over to pay this. So at least that money is actually doing something instead of just sitting in a line item. But it doesn't cost the county any more money.
okay, that was
And that's the big thing that I was looking for is, okay, it's great to have Rick come on board. It really is it's less than GNRC's charging us for consulting. But where
That
does
was
the
my
money come
next
from?
question. Is he willing to replace GNRC?
No. And I talked to him about that, because it would be more, I mean, he is doing that for Ashland City. He is their planning consultant. His concern was he doesn't know how much longer he's gonna be doing it. He's at the end of his career. This is kind of freelance stuff that he's been doing. He doesn't want, as he said, to leave us in a ditch. He didn't want to take over doing that for us, and then 4 or 5 years down the road, okay, I'm done, I'm retiring permanently, and now we've got nobody.
Question.
Yeah.
So once he sees us through these topics and we need to get through with them, does he have a recommendation possible?
I have talked to him about that, and he said currently there isn't anyone. GNRC they've kind of run everyone else off because of the cost. There's not any local firms anymore. He said now there's some national firms that we could look into if we wanted to do that. He said, but it's kind of interesting. He went into some other conversations that I will leave for him to make as far as his internal information from GNRC.
I mean,
I'm not
yeah,
gonna
because
go
by
into
and large,
that.
I haven't been completely impressed with it.
And they do more than just planning for the county. The 16,000 that we pay is just for the planning side, but they also help with grants and some of the other stuff for the rest of the county. Because I talked with Amy about that also, because she handles from both sides. Kind of, are we getting our money's worth on that?
Depends on who you ask.
It depends on, yeah. I'd like to see a little more assistance, but
Maybe there's another career path for you.
it's kind of limited right now. With the new contract, it kind of changed things up. They actually stated now, you know, this is the most we're gonna do for you. Where before it was kind of left, well, if you have other projects, then we can discuss that. But
Understood. Okay.
it changed up. But that's and this will be going before, the full commission on this month's meeting, that contract. And hopefully we can get that approved. And, Jack was actually pretty excited about it. He thought it was a bargain.
I don't
Also-
disagree. It is a good deal.
Talking with Rick, he said, more than likely, the 11,000, he's like, well, that's what I charged them. I did a lot more work than that, but that's where I capped it. Okay, well, he said, ours should be much easier than theirs, and if he doesn't use the full 11,000, then we only bill him for what he uses. So I wanted to keep that cap in there for certain commissioners who, like to watch that, so that they know exactly how much it would cost at the max. Next on our agenda, any other questions on that?
So those meetings, we had two or three, I went to two or three of them up at the courthouse.
Yep.
You know, we sat there and wrote stuff over, so all that was just, that's the only thing we got out of it was a little something to eat.
Yeah. And they took about $3,000 from us, yeah, 3,600, I think.
Okay.
Yep.
That's a bargain.
All right, the next one is an interesting one here. It's this, it's the grass. I actually had a gentleman contact me, and Sam's been working with a gentleman for quite some time. This grass ordinance is not something that I'm proposing that we go forward as far as a, the gentleman actually put this proposal as an amendment for the rural areas for lots of 5 acres or more. Right now, if you are in a subdivision, and that doesn't mean, a subdivision could be thoroughbreds, subdivision could be any property that was, was actually cut up into smaller lots. If it was cut up in smaller lots, came before planning as a site plan, approved, it's a subdivision. So you could have 8 acres and still be in the subdivision. I don't think a lot of people are aware of that. But if you're in a subdivision, you have to maintain your property to what is the maximum height of 1 foot on your grass. And this gentleman has an empty lot. He's got a house beside it and that's the drawing, the picture in the back there that you can see. That drawing is his proposal of what he'd like to see us do. He owns the house there. It is Burnley. You're right. I didn't even pay attention to that. So the house there with the swimming pool. So he owns that lot, but then No, that's
He
not
owns, the one where you see just the footer. The new house on the 1 acre, the bottom 1 acre lot.
okay,
And then he owns
the empty lot beside it.
2 large tracts behind it.
Okay. And so he's run into an incident where the neighbor beside him is complaining that his grass is too tall and there's snakes and rats and whatnot that are living in there and coming in onto the neighbor's property. It is in the country, but he's the last lot. That empty lot is the last lot of that subdivision. So he falls under the subdivision regulations of a maximum of 1 foot on the grass. What he would like is in the rural areas, he would like for us to make an amendment to what we already have, where that he would only have to do a 25 foot around his property line near his neighbors, where he would meet that regulation and be able to let the rest of the property grow up. What are y'all's thoughts on that?
To be clear, real quick, he believes it's his neighbor. Nobody's told him it's his neighbor.
Yes, and I can only go off what he's told me,
Yeah.
and he's the one who sent me this. I read through it. It seems reasonable enough for discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to bring it before us and see what y'all thought.
I know in other states they have verbiage in place like this, where it's so feet off the line.
And I think, if we didn't like 25, if you went 30.
Like on large undeveloped tracts like this.
Exactly.
You know,
So-
and they make them, in other states, I know that they have to maintain that around a fence line as well. But
What if there's no,
Help me
bu-
understand, I'm sorry, go ahead.
what if there's no buildings on the property?
Yeah.
Or there's nobody around it? Does it still has to be maintained like that?
If it's
According
within,
to the ordinance.
if it's within a subdivision, yes.
Yeah, but, like sometimes at home, I cut hay off of it, but you don't cut hay every year, every day at the moment.
So
If you
Tell me
were to-
what the
That's
definition of
ambiguous.
subdivision is.
it's very ambiguous.
it's very ambiguous, but if it's been chopped up into a subdivision, like this area, there's probably, just guessing, there's probably 15 lots that were created in one group out of a farm. It is now considered a subdivision of properties, and none of them technically are agricultural properties. They're also residential, for one. Number two, they're too small to be considered agricultural properties in the state's eyes of tax exemption and ag exemption. So,
our current situation is he has to keep the whole property below. So even if he wanted to grow hay off of it, he couldn't. Or
What are these zoned as?
residential,
Are these, both of these lots in the back?
yes.
We're only talking about residential property? Or we're talking about agriculture?
It says subdivision in our rules, it says 1 foot, but knowing other rules, agriculture, ag exemption areas, they get a free pass on pretty much everything. So you can't do anything with agriculture lots.
Technically,
Does that make sense?
It does, this is clear as mud to me.
Okay, so,
And so my situation.
Yep.
My property, I have 3 acres,
Mhm.
agriculture, still A1, I'm surrounded by A1.
Mhm.
Does this, if we change this, does that mean the people that are A1 have to keep a 25-foot?
no, because you're not in a subdivision and you're not residential.
but technically, everything was cut
I
off
mean,
on
but
farms at some point.
my 3 acres is cut off of that property that I'm surrounding.
But it's still not.
I would say
subdivision.
it would be based off my interpretation, honestly. And I would say, just without looking at all the specifics to your issue and what you're explaining, I would say that you would not have to follow by any of that.
And
But
I wouldn't want to,
technically, you
make
wouldn't be a
any-
farm.
I'm sorry,
Technically, you wouldn't be a farm,
I mean,
so.
surrounding me is a farm.
Yeah.
I'm not a farmer, obviously, but surrounding me is hay fields, and so I don't want them to have to keep part of their hay field short
Right.
just because they're surrounding me. Does that make sense?
Exactly, but this would be pertaining to R1s.
Only R1s.
When you run into a situation, for example, Lewis Beasley's property that we rezoned to R1 recently, where he's got several hundred acres now that is R1. Technically, he now falls under, because it hasn't been
Good on him.
subdivided yet,
But
but once it's subdivided, all of that will have to, it'll all fall into it.
So what if the,
once he starts, all this is gonna be as clear as mud unless you know all the different laws out there. Once you start getting into development, once they've started in development and they become a developed subdivision, then it has to be maintained. If he is claiming it as agriculture, even though he's R1 and he's using it for hay, no matter what, it being R1, if he's using it for hay and he has 150 acres and he's using it for hay, he's exempted. He falls under another state law.
Because of the intended use of the property.
okay, so if the smaller lot is R1, but the surrounding lot is agriculture, it doesn't apply.
So let me give you a clear hypothetical, okay? So you can fit this into wherever situation you've got. Let's say we've got several farms around here that have cut off a 3-acre tract for their house and left the farm separate. The 3-acre tract will have to be mowed constantly, no matter what. It needs to be maintained. If that's a 3-acre lot, it can't be considered agriculture in any form or fashion, even if they're trying to add the back of their yard to their farm. It's not part of their farm. It's not, it has nothing to do with their farm, even though they own both. The farm, they can do whatever they want with it. They can let it go to trees, whatever.
it sounds to me like, and I could be misconstruing this completely, is you're trying to get some yard management out of developers who come in and buy land, get it rezoned,
And
and
then walk
then
off.
start selling it, but they start selling it, but these unsold lots and stuff, they don't wanna have to pay to do anything for them, they just don't wanna have to maintain them at all.
Yeah.
It's a way of having them maintain property within a development that is not fully sold out and that type of thing.
We have one very well-known subdivision, actually we have two, but one of them's maintained. I never have to say anything about it, but one of them I have to ask him about every month to mow. It's in a well-known subdivision we got, and it's about 5 acres, it's undeveloped, because he had building houses on it. But there's houses on both sides of that piece.
And
Constantly
I have
having
no
to
problem
do
with
it.
that part.
Yeah, that just is
That-
like protection for the
Right, that sounds
development.
great, but what else does this do? Is my,
Right now, it's very open-ended, but looking at MTS's directions, ours matches it almost identically. This is the state policy of 1 foot for any subdivision lot. You can,
I guess I just don't want, I wanna make sure that no farmer has to cut hay or leave a 25-foot area that they have to cut short.
so
Where
the
they
farmer
can't-
won't have to.
Okay, and I get that now. I just
They're
wanna,
exempted. Yes.
That bunch down there beside old Cunningham Kelly building, that's waist high, that subdivision, whether it was gonna put one, never have.
Yeah, it's R2.
I didn't like the farmer's office.
Huh.
And that was another point that the individual brought up was, it's not a violation until there's a complaint filed on it. And he thought that was a little ambiguous and would like for something a little more consistently across the county. Unfortunately, that is the way our enforcement when it comes to zoning operates. And unless we're willing to hire 1 or 2 more people just to do enforcement and to do the follow-up that goes along with that, I don't really understand how that can change.
There's a lot of follow-up, because it's a full-time job.
Yeah.
So, a lot of email traffic, court, a lot of letters, a lot of gathering information constantly for Brandon. He asked me to drive out to the sites that we get open complaints on all the time and take new pictures. There's a lot that goes into it.
And
So,
when, I mean, and it may not be like this, because I'm thinking back when I was on the city council. But after all that's done, and you get sent out and you do all this and everything, and you even go to court. So where does it fall in the county? Who has to finally go out there and make them do it?
so if it gets to court and they decided not to listen to anything I say, then the judge will give them a court order to do it, and usually give them 30 to 60 days, depending on what it is. And then it's my job to watch them and make sure they do it within 30 to 60 days. If they don't, then I have to bring it back to court.
But if it doesn't go to court, where
If
does
it
it
does-
wind up, in whose pocket, in whose realm of authority?
Mine. I keep pestering
It
them.
doesn't go to
until
the sheriff's department eventually, not anymore?
No, I
It's
keep,
kind of better then.
I send one letter out, they contact me, I give them a set number of days. And then at that time period, it's 30, 60 days, whatever it is, then I go back out and I see if they've complied. If they haven't complied, then I turn it over to Brandon. And Brandon sends them a letter. And then if they don't comply in the time limit that he gave them, then he takes it to court, which is whenever the court meets. And then the judge will give them 30, 60 days to comply. And then I have to go back out and recheck.
Well, I was gonna say, y'all realize how much money you're talking about
Yeah.
when you get your lawyer involved. That's, I don't know what y'all pay him per hour, but that's that much money per hour. That's a lot. I mean, yes.
And so as Sam is going through the process, this process can take 6 months, easy. And then all the person has to do is go out and mow their yard and they're in compliance, and then it all starts all over again.
Yeah, they mow it once and then they stop mowing it. And then it all starts over.
But the county is out the money
every time.
of Sam's time to go out there, attorney fees, even court costs.
If this goes any further, it has to be made clearer.
Yeah.
Because,
Well, like I said, I brought it the way that the gentleman gave it to me. I didn't mess with it because I wanted it to be discussed as is, and then to see if y'all think it's even worth addressing, or if we should just keep it the
I
way
think
it is.
I think he has good points. We do in agriculture, we do allow 3 acre lots. That's the smallest you can go without adding fire hydrants, which is not gonna happen with our, situation at the moment. So going with the smallest measurement, which is 3 acres for a lot, I think is fairly reasonable. 5 is pretty much standard for agriculture.
In his proposal, he did take it to, he's suggesting 5. It specifically states in the second paragraph, without being A1, so it's only would apply to residential lots that are 5 acres or bigger. Instead of having to mow the whole lot and maintain it to 1 foot, you would just do the 25 foot around.
It would look, keep in mind, in some situations like the subdivision Gene did out on 231, there is several center lots that are over 5 acres. And it would look quite silly in that subdivision to have hay fields.
So,
That's a question.
yes.
It's a legal question. If me as a property owner, I just make you go through all the processes, Sam coming out, pictures, warnings, letters, and finally the lawyer. If I make the county go to all that, can you put something in an ordinance at the end that I then have to pay the court cost on it if I lose in court?
That's up to Brandon. He has the authority.
Okay.
He has the.
I mean, to me, that's where it all, if I make you go to all that trouble over just not mowing a yard,
There, we have fines in place. It is, what, that area is a little convoluted at the moment.
I
But
didn't know
we,
if that's possible. I just
But
thought
I
you
do see
could.
the point that because in the example I
They
gave,
pay for it.
you could get, you could go almost 6 months and never actually go to court. And right before it goes to court, you go and mow, and when he goes to make his final look, okay, he's in compliance. And so there's no court, so you didn't lose, you didn't win, so now who pays for everything up to that point?
If there's no monetary possibility on that person.
here's the problem for my convoluted understanding of the situation in regards to our fines. We charge $50 a day every day that you're not in compliance. To get that money, from what I understand from Brandon, I could be misunderstanding, but we've been doing this for a bit. We still have to go to court to get the money. Court has to grant it. But we have one legal case that's been going on for a long time that it has been in and out of court that we are asking for that money, but it's the only one that I know of that we are requesting that.
I just didn't know if the county had more authority to do that, if it was part of if you pass a resolution, if it was part of the resolution. And that's obviously a question for Brandon.
There is fines out there. We need to make it more clear on how to obtain the money from the fines.
And that's kind of one of the things that I've been talking with Rick about, as we go through and he's cleaning up things, when we get to those spots, finding ways to put more teeth in the penalties, so that there's a reason to,
Problem is the penalties
kind of
don't fall in our ordinances. They're in titles.
but they can be added.
They could be added. Right now, it falls under titles, which comes out of the charter, I believe.
What do other counties do? I mean, we're not the only one.
They have codes enforcement officer that it is
I'm
granted
talking
the
about, if they go to
ability.
court and stuff, they obviously have fees or fines big enough that it's more advantageous for the property owner to go ahead and mow it than to go all the way through the process of going to court.
So other counties, as you're asking, they have codes enforcement officers which actually works for the sheriff's department. And then they drive out in a sheriff's car, or, I'm sure there's other counties that don't, but I know Gallatin and them, they'll drive out in a sheriff's car and they'll actually give you a citation on spot. You owe this. You don't make that mistake twice.
I understand, but we're never gonna be like Wilson and Sons.
So, but that's how it works for
Yeah, I
them.
understand that. I mean, they're so big, they've got everything. They're like Nashville, really.
And we're not in a situation to be able to do it right now in Trousdale, but my brother worked for the city of Plano, north of Dallas, was a recycling truck driver. And what Plano did was they authorized the recycling truck drivers and the trash truck, because they're the ones who drive around and see everything. And they kept a citation book with them, and if you were in violation, they put it right there, stuck it to your trash can.
Can't you see,
But
can't you see your next county court meeting that here?
Let's
The
not do
garbage
that.
man
They do
can
that,
be-
they do that in Indianapolis as well.
yeah,
Or the trash guys can, yeah.
So
In
you
the
can-
city, inside the city limits of
Some parts of the country, that'd be
If your
dangerous,
yard's
right
out of
down right
control,
outside citation.
those guys, the trash truck guys are the ones that write the citations.
But
Get
that's
shot.
how I try to get
Yes,
that. I try to get the
exactly.
postal
That's what we
departments
did.
post office to do that with all the,
and it typically
Yeah.
pass that
No.
ordinance back. You
Special
know, like
election and
stresses.
everything, they'd have to have.
You'll look at them all day long, just put a sticker on it and say, fix it. Like, if you want
All
it
right.
fixed, put the sticker on there with it.
So, like I said, and I brought that up as a for example. It was something that in conversation that my brother actually brought up to my attention, that, that's the way that particular municipality handled it. I found out that there are others that do it the same way. I don't think that our solid waste is up to that task in knowledge of what would be a violation and not. And I don't think that we're to a point that.
They're not gonna get out of that truck and do it either, man.
I don't know if they've got the time to get out and would even, they have so much on their plate, I don't really think that would be but it's a thought of down the road, it's another option. But like just hiring a codes enforcement officer, so that you had a planning person and you had a codes, so you got someone to do your inspection, your planning stuff, your zoning, you've got somebody who's doing enforcement and inspections.
Does our charter allow for that?
Yes,
I am the codes enforcement officer, the building official, the zoning official, the planner,
both.
the health official.
And you wear a badge, I mean, I've seen it.
the state of Tennessee also allows us to have both.
What do you do for food?
I'm the I'm the health official in the absence of an actual health official, or the deputy health official to the health official.
You've been deputized, am I right? Yeah, that's what I thought.
So that is why it doesn't have to go to the sheriff's office, they just throw it all on him. Is there any action that anyone would like to make on this, or do we just leave this for now as a discussion point?
I think you could be throwing planning if anyone wants my opinion. I want them at GNRC to look at other places and come up with a recommendation. But I know we match in-test right now with what we got, but if we want to change it, I'd like to see what everybody else is.
Would y'all be interested in GNRC doing some research on it and see what other towns or counties our size? And we can't keep comparing ourselves with Wilson and some of the
Right,
counties.
exactly.
We're doing. Because I think the lady, Keelan,
Mhm.
what are her other counties that she advises besides us?
I don't know, I know she's got like 5.
Yeah, so she has others that she directly advises, just like she does Charleston County.
And she's got experience with Portland.
Right. So she might could just look through her counties and see some things, that pertain to this that might be of interest to you.
Just let her, talk to her, then come back with it later.
Alright, so is that a motion?
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? No. All right, we want opposed, 4 yeses, we'll send it on to planning for them to look into, and we'll do further discussion down the road. The last one, I don't have anything, and that's why there's nothing in your packet on this one. The commercial building regulations, hopefully we'll have.
A nervous head.
Is
Um,
that your ring?
Yeah.
I do it all the time. Amy kills me.
So hopefully we'll have something at planning's next meeting, from GNRC as far as, what these building regulations are gonna look like. I just wanted to come, bring it up in this meeting so that you guys can I'd like to hear some of your ideas on it. The discussion coming out of planning so far is using some of what, Sumner County and Gallatin proper has done with theirs, where it would give a regulation. We can't limit what materials are used. If it is approved by the state material, you can't stop a business from using it, but you can limit how much of the building is made up of certain materials. So I think right now the discussion is, we're pretty much at 70%.
But that looks to be a percentage that seems to have the majority of the planning commission.
And
And that is on the it's on our agenda for this coming Monday to get in depth on that.
And that's on the facade of the building. So you got a 70%, so it would either be made up of brick, stucco, rock. Can you remember
Hardy board.
the hardy board?
Basically, no final.
And then, you know, down the sides, across the back, that would be, we really haven't discussed anything, but it's more of keeping that front building facade. And we've been kicking around, and I don't think we've actually taken a vote in planning yet, as far as maybe even the architectural design of the front to try to keep them all in kind of the same, not the same exact style, because that looks very bland and makes it hard to distinguish one business from another, but at least to try to keep it in a style so that you still have differences, but you have some continuity to the appearance. So you've got, the way Hartsville Pharmacy has done theirs. You know, it's very representative of what the downtown buildings would have looked like when they were first done, with a little bit of a modern twist to it. Put that in a contrast of what Dollar General Market did with their building. That's still a sore spot for me, because I was up in Salina and they had a full brick facade market. And in the middle of Hartsville, we have mostly steel built. It's just.
Covered with that. They
It's,
gonna ask to build that, so.
So they got more brick on the one down on 231 than they got
They
on the
gonna
one.
ask to,
Right
you're
here on
up the
South
road
Ridge.
here, they're fixing,
Just a couple of miles apart.
here they're fixing to ask for another
Who's that?
dollar.
I mean,
4 or 5 miles up the road.
You see a Dollar General bag blowing around, because you don't need to grow around.
I have heard that rumor. I have. And so, along with that, we're also starting to get off into stormwater runoff regulations. But I think right now, the focus has kind of been pulled into just with the commercial building appearances and that sort. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes from GNRC and what we come out of planning with, so that I can have something to bring, so we can kind of look over in here. Any questions or concerns that kind of take back to planning as we're having these discussions, as far as that
I was
goes?
gonna just say, please feel free to come to the planning meetings. You know, I've been on the planning commission for 30 years, maybe a little longer. And this is the first concerted effort since I've been on to really affect some positive change in Hartsville and the county with the way commercial buildings look. And most of the time we were just so, hey, great, we didn't care what it looked like. But we've realized that if we don't manage things and have our rules in place where we can manage things, then we're gonna get more pole barns.
You go with that,
Read them and move.
where, Taco Bell is. Got across the street, a couple of new, buildings have been built and all that, but they're all, you tell the difference in them, but they all look alike. They're all brick out front, on the front, everything.
I went down and I took a trip down to Mississippi and visited a city down there who, on paper, you'd think that, okay, this is gonna be great. They had regulations for everything. And I went down there and I looked, because I wanted to not just, it's great to see it on paper and you read, okay, I can see how that keeps this issue from occurring and whatnot. But then go down and see it actually applied. You couldn't find anything. Every building was identical. The signs were all very minimal. So unless you knew where you were going, you'd drive right by the place. Actually, one place we drove by twice, my wife and I. couldn't even tell it was the right
It's
building.
like California suburb, you
Yeah.
can't find anything.
Yeah, I went to Lebanon the other day to find a place, and I drove by it twice.
And
Sign
actually,
was so small.
Lebanon actually has a South Hartman corridor that they've come up with that is kind of the same as what I went and visited, looking at their regulations on that. And I think it goes way above and beyond what we're trying to do here. I don't think anyone wants the town to look like the same building all around town. It takes the character away. But if, whatever we were to come up with, depending on how it got passed through the commission, this would not affect pre-existing buildings unless they did major remodels. A major remodel, correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, but that's anything that adds more than 40% of value to the building. So existing, businesses
A
aren't gonna be
roof or
hit with
something's
this.
not gonna do it, but if you do much more than a roof, it's.
Yeah.
Basically,
You're
just
gutting the
don't cut the
building and-
inside.
Yeah.
If
If
you
you're
got
gutting
it,
the,
then you've got to fix it. So,
and that just makes you would have to bring everything else up to code anyway. So that's kind of the whole point. I did have some discussion on Facebook, kind of letting some of the information out. A lot of people, that was some of their concerns was, okay, so you're gonna make existing businesses where the economy's bad right now and things are expensive, you're gonna make them go and do all this. That's not the intent at all.
we can't legally backdate anything.
And aren't asking to. This would solely, if it gets passed, and it would have to still go through the full commission to be approved. If it were to get passed, it's solely to give us a way of managing growth. We were warned about all this growth 10, 15 years ago, that Nashville was gonna be the next Atlanta. We were gonna have this 1 million people influx around Nashville and the surrounding counties. And as a county, Trousdale County has done nothing to prepare for it. And now it's here, and we're constantly, now, it looks like the last, 3 or 4 years now in planning, we're constantly having to look at things from a put a fire out as it pops up sort of situation, because we don't have an actual overall plan. And this kind of gets us moving in a direction where instead of spending all the money and waiting and having all this growth come in with no regulation, and then you have a plan that you can't implement because you already had all that growth, at least we can start managing it and getting some control so that we have time to come up with an overreaching plan on how the rest of the county gets developed. Driving around right now, it's amazing how many houses have popped up on that 231 corridor. Which, looking back at the previous 20-year plan that the county had from the 80s, it's amazing how accurate they were. They knew exactly where the growth was going to be coming in at. And I know the water department has already done theirs, their 20-year plan, their new one, for growth on the water system, and are working in that direction. I'm
You
really,
couldn't even walk through what's now developed over there between Broad Road and 231. You couldn't even walk through there because of the saw briars. It was unbelievable. I tried to hunt out there. I'm like, forget it.
Yeah.
It was awful. 20 years ago, I'm like, to look at it now, it's unbelievable. It is.
and now that all that is kind of, you got that development from Antioch Church all the way up to 231-25. Now it's growing the north side and Bass Road. We've got between the two, Freedom and the one we just,
Honestly, over the last 2 years, we probably have 45 lots up there now.
Yeah,
That
on the
haven't
north
been
side.
developed yet.
and then that's not even counting the ones on Tupelo that we just, that have been split up now. And now we're starting to get growth coming up 141, and so all that growth's moving to town. As it moves to town with houses, we're gonna have businesses wanting to come in.
When Little Jean starts filling all those down there.
Yeah.
Beside the body shop.
Yep.
And then we've
that
got,
people are gonna, business people are gonna see
And
that.
that goes back to the other can of worms that's been kicked down the road. No problem with education coming up, so big time.
Possibly. We've been,
With all the growth, they're gonna bring a lot of children that
Well,
we're gonna have to address that.
I've been saying that for years, but now I'm still wondering where the heck are they?
Well,
We've been lucky.
According
you
to
know,
the
2
last
years
projections
ago-
from the state of Tennessee,
Yeah.
we're not getting the growth of children in Tri-State County.
I don't know if they're older people moving here or whatever.
So with the
or-
future development, though.
Are there not hundred and twenty-five more students this year?
That was last year. That was the this is 21, 22. That was 2020. That was the year before this school year.
Okay.
This year, we're probably up.
But that's 130 in 2 years.
Yeah,
That's a
something
lot
like that.
for a county this size. They're still gonna be feeling the impact. I'm thinking the next 3 to 5 years, they're gonna feel
Now, keep in mind-
I think so. I mean,
Well,
but
if
we
people moved in on
have,
231
luckily,
single,
when they built the high
They gonna
school,
have babies.
it was built, bigger than needed. There's room to grow there.
5, 6
And
years
stuff,
from now,
uh,
they'll have
There's,
One school.
there's actually room to grow at all 3 schools, as long as it's, we don't get Rutherford County type growth in a year. You know, I mean, obviously, we're talking about common sense growth. If it's 100 kids, the way school growth typically goes is say in a year, out of your 100% growth in a year, 40 to 50% of the elementary kids, and then some middle and then some high school. If we got a whole concentration at one school, that's where we could have a problem.
I would keep in mind though, that I would honestly say there's about 50 to 100 kids out there that are being homeschooled at the moment.
Oh, it's helped us a lot.
Yeah,
There's
First
actually
Baptist
more than
Church.
200
First
kids,
Baptist Church.
as far as-
School there.
public school goes.
Mhm.
You know, I'm not one of these public school people that think they all go regular school. No, I don't have a problem with educating their kid the best way possible.
If they
Every
ever,
kid's different.
if 100 of them come back, then
The problem you got is the parent with that. Now, this education thing is the kid who gets in trouble at school and you want to punish them, or they, according to your policies, parents say, you ain't doing nothing. They take them out and homeschool them, and they just let them stay at home. They don't get them, you know, these people we're talking about homeschooling, these couple of hundred, they're in an association around here. They do an excellent job. You may see them out at First Baptist Church on Thursdays. They're out there a lot with combined together for like PE and other activities. I mean, they do a great job with those kids. It's the kid I'm talking about that whose parent just said, they got mad, took them out of school. They signed that form saying they're going to homeschool them.
And now they're behind.
Oh,
Yeah,
they're,
and they keep
and then in a couple of years, they bring them back and can't understand why they need special education services, which are like triple the cost of what it was to begin with, you know, because they're so far behind.
I will say that this semester I just took my daughter out.
I'm
I
not-
still have a
I'm not
son
knocking
in high school, but middle school and a girl is really,
It
really
is,
hard.
it is, and I'm
And
not talking about
so,
something
no, I
that-
understand that. She's not in trouble at all.
Yeah.
I don't feel accused at all. Yeah, I am one of those 200. So
That's great, and like I said, they do a great job.
I'm not at First Baptist Church. or
Well, I don't
any
know
sort
who
of-
all is,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
you know, I don't
But-
have that kind of information. But the parent, I'm gonna tell you, last thing I'd have wanted was my mama sitting over my shoulder making me do, because I'd have had to do a whole lot more work than I did when I was in school. We didn't do too much on our own, did we, Dave?
We struggled too, but we got through it. We weren't at the top 10 of the class.
So one other comment that I wanted to make, because the discussion's been had in the commission. I wanted, since I have enough people who would know in this one room. So just for clarification purposes, the impact fees that developers are paying or for, you know, when you're building your home, none of that money goes directly to the schools. All that money goes directly into 101 fund, the general fund for the county. So just wanted to make sure that got on camera so that people could know that information. I know it's been put out there that, you know, the schools get half of that, and, you know, that's not true. All that money goes straight to the county.
The schools actually don't really have a need for a set amount of money coming in yet. When there's a need, if there's a need for a new school or something, then the school board would just come to the county court, present the needs assessment and stuff, and ask for funding.
There was an elected official who made that point and said that's money that could go to him. Just wanting to make the point that no, that money does not go to the schools. That money is already going into the general fund already. I am still looking into.
The county court's not gonna be able to get away from its obligation to fund county services,
Exactly.
so it's just, to me, that just sounds like a money management thing.
It is. The other thing was, with that impact fee, there has been some discussion on whether that can get raised. And I've tried to do best I can as far as diving in to try to find out how that was put in place and the process it was originally put in place. I found something under the flood plan that referenced flood impact fees, but I can't find anything that talks. I know we raised the impact fee in planning, which we suggested and the commission voted to approve that back 5 years ago or so.
First time it
It should
was,
probably be
the
looked at
first
again.
impact fee was $1,000.
And we bumped it up.
Yeah, it went to the size of the
Is
house.
that the ordinance? Cause I have the ordinance too.
It went to the size of the house then.
Yeah, this is where it was bumped up. So this is the second. Now there's one there should have been one bar before this
Yeah, I don't have-
where it was created, and that's the one I can't find either. So that, do you have one
Yeah, that's the
before
one I
that?
have.
And that's, like I said, that's the only one I can find.
It would be hard for me to believe that the county commission can't change.
I mean, if we
Yeah,
created that ordinance and voted on that, which the
Well,
commission did, then why can't we change it?
When Budget and Finance was talking with
2003.
CTAS about it, he's the one who brought up
Yeah,
the
that's
question,
what
well,
it
how did it get started? Because it's
That's
still a
correct.
private act.
It's 20 years old.
We can adjust, that's fine, but the state has apparently been getting on to municipalities for impact fees and not letting,
It says previously passed, so this
So,
was
okay.
done in 2000.
So
I
that's where
remember
I'm
voting
trying
for
to
it,
find
I just don't remember
18.
when or what, how it got.
2018
I just
here, I think it is.
remember we had it in the
I mean,
beginning,
but
we
they
brought
still
it in
want that one.
because all the big builders were heavy against it.
I mean, I don't know, if that's an ordinance, we just do another ordinance changing it.
I mean, in 5 years, it can be readdressed. I mean, it's we're
Well, I
5
think
years
what
now.
David's saying is the state, since that time, the state legislature has implemented some rules governing things like that. Is that what you're saying?
that is what CTAS told Budget and Finance when they were going over.
So
the
that's a
full-
whole different.
They were just looking,
story.
they were looking for anything, suggestions from CTAS of where we could raise
Not
funds.
to compare us to Wilson County, but you ought to see what it's like.
Oh, yeah.
Impact
But we
fees
don't
over
know
there.
what those state laws are.
No, it's, like I said, CTAS had brought it up, and he was referring to the way it was put into effect. Whether it was for a private act or whether it was something that was voted on. It got a little deeper than I'm educated on. And so like I said, I was trying to do, just trying to go back and just try to see. And I can't find the one that predates where we upped it, where it was actually created.
Did you ask Rita?
And she's trying to dig, but Rita's got her own job to do. Some of that's really hard to dig into.
Is that the original, is that the one where the money was put into education debt service? Is that the one you're talking, there was one impact fee on builders and the money was put into education
That
debt
one
service?
clearly states,
And then a couple,
No,
General service fund.
okay,
so when we.
there was one and the money went into education, the
was that
education
when you
debt
were
service.
there?
That's when I was on the county commission.
Well, that helps.
Well, see,
So
this
that'll be
was,
for
this was
back.
originally 03, and then it was in
So 2003, let's see, August 2003 was the first one. And then this one was done 2018.
And so I was on planning when we proposed that one.
But we're 5 years past that now. I mean,
No, it's time to look at it if
It
we
is.
can. My point is, talking with CTAS, I don't know if we can do it again. By current state law, if we can adjust it again, legally.
Can't you just
I mean, if
So that's
scrap
CTAS
it
can,
and then do a private act?
So we can't do a private act now because of current state law.
Either way,
If
we need to
already-
find out, I mean, 5
That's
years, though,
why.
I mean, 5 years is a long time to leave something dormant like that with escalating costs.
Yeah.
Either way, we need to have the attorney look into what's the
absolutely.
legalities on it. So,
That's-
and it
that's
could
a
be,
good point.
it could be as simple as instead of 70 cents a square foot for residential housing, just turn it into $1 a square foot for residential housing.
Dollar a quarter, whatever.
Well, and the implications in that conversation was looking for clarification, whether when we put that into effect, were we legally able to do it in the
Dwight
first
Jewell was
place?
on that.
So
He
it's a-
was chairman.
It's a
Way
main.
No, that was before. He was, he had Sam's job on that.
This originally got started, David, back years ago when I was on the commission, with y'all,
Yeah.
that 2003 sounds about
Oh,
right,
yeah.
because I was on the commission for 20 years.
It's a
Yeah.
mute
I
point
think
until
they
we
went
get
back
that
farther
turned
than
up.
that.
Because Rod Bowen was the chairman when we proposed that to the full commission.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what we gotta do here is, we need to make a motion to get this approved,
I don't think there's really anything, I just wanted to bring you before everyone, so we kind of had an idea.
Well,
It's just one more thing that I'm looking into to try to get some information to bring forward. It's amazing, the more I
I
get
brought
dive
it up
off
a
into
couple
this.
times.
I mean,
We need to
5 years is a good window to look at
It is,
reevaluating this.
if we can raise it, I think we should, but at the same point, we need to find out if legally we can first. And make sure that what we have on the books is still by state law and we're good to go to continue collecting. But that's one of the more I get into the planning stuff and the way things have been done in Charlestown County, the more confused I get. It's definitely a very interesting situation.
It's just, then the more evidence of why we need someone like Rick who can come in and do this,
He's probably
because
got
it is very convoluted and, I mean, you've got to really know what you're doing, and he's been doing this so long. I mean,
Like
this is
Sam-
just
We
good
probably
evidence.
got it where we
Like Sam
started up the
says,
first time.
like Sam said earlier in the
We
meeting,
raised $8,000 on it.
if you don't know all the contributing laws to the subject,
Exactly.
it gets very convoluted very quickly.
You can easily make assumptions that you're gonna end up being wrong on.
Exactly.
You've gotta know all the avenues to it.
Common sense doesn't always work.
No, I'm finding that out very quickly. Rosalie, do you have anything that you wanted to bring up?
Well, no, you pretty much have covered everything and what we're gonna be doing and planning. You do have some more information that I'll be sending out tomorrow that I received from GMSC about the commercial building regulations, also going into, deforestation and things of that nature, so.
There have been, it got brought up in planning for discussion, of a tree ordinance that a tree preservation ordinance that we had kind of kicked around. That got a lot of attention. Apparently people watching the meeting were very upset. What do you mean I can't cut a tree down on my property?
Again, we can't backdate.
And once again, the conversation, if I'm remembering correctly, was solely based on industrial and commercial. It was not agricultural or residential. So,
The whole gist of that conversation was if someone's gonna come in and do an industrial project or a commercial project, that they have to maintain their property around the building just as much as they do their building itself.
so
That's what,
that was the discussion that we had on that. And I think a lot of people were getting, they're only half hearing what was being discussed.
What do you want to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I just,
They just
if
get
anyone's
that
had any complaints or any comments to them, that y'all understand that that's what planning's talking about. Of course, when we get something concrete from planning, it will come through us. We'll be able to take a look at it before it goes before Mr. Beller and then to the floor. I think that seems to be a very productive pathway of what, as much as we're getting done. I think we've gotten more done in the last 3 months than has gotten done from this side of the planning situation in several years. And so I think it's stuff that's needed to be updated and looked at. Is there anything else that anyone's had brought to them that you might want looked at or discussed? Any other topics as far as zoning and codes that someone's brought to your attention, either what they believe to be an overreach or not enough?
What about somebody move into an old subdivision and set up a junkyard?
Well, junkyards aren't allowed anywhere.
Junkyards have to be approved through the BZA.
Yeah.
So if they're setting up a junkyard, then somebody needs to complain about it.
We're all out in the county.
Well,
So
and you're talking about, you
junkyards are
said
not allowed anywhere.
subdivision, that's a
Circle Drive.
different set of rules.
He was over here in this building that got caught a fire and he moved. He's
Again,
got a
same,
backyard full of cars.
people listening say I can't do anything until their complaints filed.
It cannot be looked up upon my office that I'm taking down anybody. So a citizen has to complain. And if a citizen complains, they have to do it in a written format, which we have a form for, that gets submitted to the attorney. So if there's an issue, then they complain, and then
It goes back to the old saying, David, that I can get away with whatever I can until somebody tells on me.
And just to point out too, that the complaints remain anonymous, so it's not like it's all.
Those are just worthless at that point, because it's gotta be a thing.
it's gonna be in writing so that if it ever makes it to court, I can legitimately stand in front of the judge and say, I'm not picking on them.
But you're not signing your name to the complaint.
This
That's the
is,
anonymous part.
this is a citizen complaint, so.
Citizen complaint is not valid unless they sign for it.
The plaintiff puts their name on the form. I don't have a form yet to show you, it's in the office, but the plaintiff puts their information on there so I can contact them and let them know that it's been resolved or what's going on with the case. But they also put all the information on the property that they're complaining about and what the particulars are that they're complaining about. I read it, I determine it, is it potentially breaking rules? If it is, then I go out and look at it. There's still a ton of workload in. I get a lot of complaints in, and trying
No doubt.
to decide between we have to walk that fine line as a county. Is this a neighbor on neighbor fight, or is this a legitimate issue? Once it becomes a fist fight between the two, we have to step back. It's between them. We cannot get involved.
That becomes a civil matter between two property owners.
100%.
Yeah, we had a divorce case for the planning commission several years ago. Actually, it was boyfriend, girlfriend, and they had adjoining property, and they were trying to make it all, fussing about it. On the planning commission, get involved.
No, thank you.
But I let them all know, once they submit their complaint, let me take care of it, I'll handle it. And then I work out an agreeable format for that person. However long it takes them, if I go out and they've got 100 cars on their property that they need to get rid of, well, they're not gonna do that in 30 days. What's a reasonable amount of time that I think is reasonable to get that done?
I can't believe nobody's complained about.
Church Street,
Yeah.
that for years.
Okay, yeah, we'll go on that
I'm
later.
like,
There's legality issues that we have to stay out of.
oh, I got you. I know, I get it.
So
Yeah,
What does that mean?
people have rights, and if it's a commercial business and potentially an antique shop with antique vehicles and it's on a commercial lot, there's only so much you can do.
It's different than a residential.
Now, if that
That's
tire
what I'm saying.
goes over into public property, it's now on public property and you can have them remove it. But it is a actual commercial building on a commercial lot
They can be stored there.
that store's full of antiques and it's got antique cars outside. So, and you would be really surprised on what actually makes an antique car on year wise.
In the county, it's
what, 20 years?
Over 20.
So half the cars driving around are actually antiques. So
That's right. It's 18 years old.
is it 15 or 20? I think
I believe it's
it wasn't much because I know
You get antique tags at 20.
I just call it broke in.
And then there's another one that even on an R1, if the vehicle's tagged and it's a registered vehicle, we don't have any ordinances that
you can
tell how many cars you
Well,
can have.
It may
on
not have to, it may
Well-
not run, but as long as it's tagged.
Right, as long as he buys
Well,
that tag every year.
Let me make sure we're clear on this. Let me make sure we're clear on this. Two different situations. Okay. Cars have to run and they have to be tagged. Okay, you can have 50 cars going down your driveway if they're all tagged and they're all running. I just dealt with another situation like that. He's got a lot of cars. I don't care how many cars he's got. That's his business. I do ask them to park them like they're parked. You know, line them up. Don't have a truck parking going on. We don't need that, but line them up on the driveway. Have as many as you want. Have 50. They're all going to be tagged and they're all going to run.
How about the guy,
That's a different situation.
old boot factory? I know they
BZA
can be running.
BZA gave him permission to work on antique cars. If that's the discussion here.
Yeah, we got a hose on that.
So,
I like
and
the
back
down
to
Starlight Hill.
if it's over 20,
Well,
if
he told us
it's
the
20
guy
years or
at
older,
Boot
it's an
Factory told us he was
antique.
gonna
I know.
clean it up
Yeah.
and was gonna fence it to where you couldn't see it.
Yeah, he done that.
Ain't done anything.
But he's parked a lot of cars over there.
The guy's got 5 acres on Starlight Hill.
At the same time, that's an industrial
Cars
lot.
everywhere.
Yeah,
It's
whether
an
you-
industrial lot.
Whether you agree or not,
Or 10 acres,
of
maybe
what's
10 acres.
there, we had an opportunity possibly that when it was sitting there abandoned and they came in to reestablish it as an industrial, as a county, we could have said no. I'm looking into more and more of that. We've always been told in planning that the county can't initiate rezonings. Well, I'm finding, looking at other municipality regulations, yeah, you can. Now, the owner has to cooperate, but you can initiate a rezoning. I would have liked to seen all the industrial down here where we have the concrete plant and the printing company taken out of downtown, the center of town, and put back. Those buildings could have been erected over in our industrial here or out at PowerCom, but they're industrial. And so when people come in complaining, well, why are you letting? We're not letting. It's an industrial lot. That's an industrial
Business.
business.
Each zoning
It
has
fits.
its uses. If it's some, that is what it
It
is.
would have to be PowerCom. My understanding is, you're talking about the industrial area out there by the convenience center.
Yeah.
It's full. It's all sold out as far as the way I understand it.
IDB doesn't own any more land.
Okay. So the empty lot there is the county's side, behind the, where they store the trash truck and whatnot, that empty field there.
I would assume. The way I understand it, it's full.
There's an empty lot between the clamshell and the metal company.
Yeah.
So, I don't know who owns it. I'm not that nosy.
Yeah, I do know that IDB doesn't have any more.
That's what I'm saying. Somebody owns that, not the.
So Anderson's was the last they had to sell.
Well, very places that have industrial
Your phone.
park.
No, the county
So
needs,
out there by the dentist's office.
the
that
county
big
needs to come up
300
with
acre
another
farm been
industrial
there, and
area.
Are
they
they
Sit
doing
there
this-
for
You-
100, huh?
The
You've
dentist
got,
office?
you've got to have the option.
Put in its
Oh, Dr. Runyon's office?
Right across
It's-
the road
it's like
there.
what,
Oh.
It's been there for
Lebanon did to
Russell
South
Wright's
Harbor.
property.
Russell Wright's
They
property.
made industrial.
You know,
park.
I said back when he was
And
out
they
there,
developed
that I
it
think
into,
perfect
the
industrial
extension
park.
right.
Wright family's
Yeah,
never.
yeah.
You know,
they're
off
not
South
gonna
Harbor
He said
there.
because it's
So,
got 300 or 400 acres
it's
in it.
pre-planning.
Did you put a school in it, a jail in it, you put business in it, it's got gas,
We
water,
did that.
sewer running through
I
it.
know, I've thought about
If
Got
the
that.
property
everything.
owner was of a mind to sell it.
Do they live there?
No,
Nobody lives there?
Nobody's
Nobody?
lived there for.
When
Maybe
Wright,
we don't
when he
Yeah.
died, his daughter owns it.
Lucy.
If she's still alive, she'd be really,
Yeah,
really,
we've got-
really
Oh,
old.
Miss
We've got a
Lucy.
couple of
Yes,
conversations
Lucy's right.
going right now.
And she never lived here. She lived in, I think,
Nobody lived
Nashville.
that house as long as I've been around.
We need to
So
look
it's still in the
at-
Russell Wright family's, inheritance,
Sure.
All right, so, Sam, you
Please
were
repeat
making
that.
a point?
The county needs to look for more industrial area to develop. You've got to think you've got to think long-term. I've made suggestions to other people, county commissioners and former mayor about an industrial area. Once it's up, I did my part. I made a
Went
suggestion.
on deaf ears.
Nobody did any legwork. So, but we are full up. We've got to pre-plan on where we want it next. And the county might actually have to purchase some property to develop that into a industrial site to do what we did before. But you gotta do like they did on South Hartman. You gotta do like they did on South Hartman. They turned all that into industrial and then wrapped it around to connect to the other side of Lebanon. the main industrial parkway. You've got to pre-plan so you can orient businesses, you know.
And that's something that we need to, as a community, not just the commission here, but as a community, figure out, okay, how we want our community to look in 20 years. I
Which
mean,
is the
our-
20-year plan that we still don't have, and we don't have any plan to get the plan.
Yeah. And so, because in doing that, do we want to be an industrial, or do we want to be just commercial, residential heavy, and still keep an agricultural feel out in the peripheral of the county?
So I just have a thought. If Rick Gregory is very familiar with Trouser County, and he doesn't want it to necessarily be
You
on,
leave here and go
like,
straight out.
our consultant,
Mhm.
but
Before you get
could
to
he
where the road
develop
comes into 20,
a long-term
before
plan?
you get to where the-
It's something we could talk to him about. Now, that would be a separate beyond the contract
Right,
of what he's
obviously,
doing.
yeah, but maybe that would be a way to
Dogs, is that-
get
is
a
that
20-year
house?
He
plan.
probably would need to do this version,
Absolutely.
because this would be in,
Yeah.
Right.
Because how we
It would-
shape
it would run over
this,
river.
right,
then he can take this information
and
and then build it
develop,
on
It's on Bruce Creek.
right.
Huh?
It's on Bruce Creek.
Yeah, it's on Bruce Creek.
So this should have been
I don't
fixed
know
when
how
we went
much it
Metro,
is.
so
It's
this can't
floodplain.
be kicked long enough.
at least 10
It's
years.
40
after.
now.
The ordinance.
It's
is-
several
There's
hundred
already
acres.
one for the city.
It's several
They
hundred
just
acres.
were hoping it would pass, they didn't want it.
Oh, you big time farmers are using it.
Yes.
Now, also in talking with Rick, there are some holes in our zoning that as we're going through and fixing things, we can fix those holes as we're voting through everything, that they can be fixed all at one time as we present this all to the full commission. And so we can, add a couple of ordinances here or there to fill in some of those holes. Instead of taking each one piecemeal coming up, we can add those in, because
We
everything's
just
gonna
need to
go
be
through.
really clear and make sure everybody
Exactly.
understands
Yep.
everything we're
I don't want anything,
doing.
I don't want
Nobody's
anything
pulling the wool
hidden.
over.
exactly. Now, there might be there's one in particular that you'll never hear me call it by a definition. It will only be talked to by its ordinance number. I have my own feelings, I've already mentioned that to this group. But that is something that can be added and fixed that way. And then once it's, before the court and getting ready to be passed, by all means, let's not hide anything from the public, but I don't want to advertise shortcomings until we have a way of fixing it. I am definitely terrified of that, yes. And I have made that known to anyone who will listen to me. It's taken way too long to even get this subject brought to a body who could do something with it.
Or an
We're
ordinance.
working on that.
Well, another thing, when all this comes to a head,
Yes, sir. We've discussed it.
when all this comes ahead, we need to make sure the county commission has a full month to read it.
Yes.
This whole dropping it the day before the meeting or,
I don't even want to give them a full month. I want to present it to them in chunks. So our residential goes to them, they vote, okay, yes, we like this part, approve it. Commercial comes before them, okay. So we'll have a month for each one, because that's a lot of information to kind of go through. I know half of them's not gonna take the time to do it, and I hate that. I wish that every one of them would go through and look at it and see the comparisons.
that's all fine and good, but my point still stands. We, on several occasions recently, I've stated at the meetings, we should not be doing this. You cannot drop it the day before the meeting or the day of the meeting and expect people to vote on it. It's not right. We're gonna put a noose
You
around
talking about
our,
hadn't even brought up at the work session or anything? It's just brought up the day of the meeting?
yes.
I don't know what you're talking about, but that's never good business for anything.
Well, there's a
If-
resolution.
Well, it may be a great, it may be a great resolution. It may be really, really, really good, but it gives the perception that somebody's trying to pull something.
And that's why it wasn't added to the agenda that night.
I'm not talking about any specific, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just saying in general,
Yeah, it's a bad practice.
it's right.
We're gonna end up paying for it, because there's been several of them, and at least two of the ordinances that have come through are written poorly, and we'll end up paying for it in the future, but I wasn't consulted on, so.
Yeah.
It gets gray, and we don't want gray. We want it to be black and white.
Any other subjects need to be discussed tonight? Second. All right, we are adjourned.